But the lawyers for 8 other HMOs and for at least one separate group of doctors today launched a new fight to keep this deal from ever getting the final stamp of approval.
The toughest that you have ever seen it?
Yes, it really is, Maria. I mean, we had a lot of things to contend with and a lot of change. But what airline managers have had to go through in the last 6 months or the last year and a half is nothing, is amazing compared to what we went through.
And we continue to see stories. We've got an outbreak of SARS, the severe acute respiratory syndrome. You've got continued worries about terrorism and, of course, just a weak economy overall. What do you think it will take to turn things around?
Well, you know, we hear a lot of talk about, is the airline model broken? And, you know, I don't think, Maria, that the airline, that the major airline model is broken. I think the problem is exactly the problem that's being addressed by most of the managements, and that's there's a cost structure that is not sustainable over the long term. And in addition, there's a fare structure that needs to be addressed.
And these were issues well before September 11th.
For sure.
These were balance sheet issues that were very, very front and center for years before September 11th. So why haven't executives noticed that and sort of made those fundamental changes that you're talking about?
Well, as you know, we addressed them head-on in the 80s. We did not have big hubs in Chicago or Dallas that could give us years of sort of insulation from the marketplace. We had it front and center in the late 80s. But you know, the 90s were a very comfortable period when airlines could continue to raise business fares and basically have high business fares and high unrestricted fares subsidizing a long-term unsustainable cost structure. It's a very difficult equation. I mean, on the other hand, you have employees who you know, have their own economics to worry about, their own family expenses. They can't give up a child. They can't cut a room off their house. It's a tough equation, but that's the struggle that's going on today.
I really want to see how you would propose taking expenses out of the business. I mean, you've got fuel costs, obviously the largest expense that is pretty obvious, and then you have the labor unions. Earlier today, we had on Don Carty. We had an exclusive interview with the former CEO of American Airlines. I'd like you to take a listen to what he had to say about the labor unions, about what he faces today, or what he faced running that airline, and then weigh in as far as the changes since deregulation. Let's listen to Don Carty.
We've been trying to change that at AMR, change the business model. We've also been trying to change the labor contracts. It is not a question of degree of unionization. JetBlue and Southwest are quite different in that regard. In fact, Southwest is more union intensive than AMR. But of course, their contracts were developed in a much later era than some of the old line carriers, and therefore they require less change than what AMR's had to go through.
Do you agree with that, Mr. Lorenzo?
Yes, for sure. There's a union contract and there's a union contract. There's a perception that they're all the same, and they're not. They're very different. There's also some unions that are house unions, some unions that are much more sensitive. Then there's other unions that are national unions, which are concerned about their national position and not as much concerned about their the position of the local carrier.
But these contracts are in place for years years ahead. How do you pay someone or agree to a contract when you don't really know what the environment will look like? Is there any way to change these long-term contracts with the union and make everybody happy? Well,
naturally, airline managements have been trying to get some stability, and unions the same thing in the contracts. Clearly now, the environment is such that you know, they're going the other way. It's a very tough equation. But you are touching on a subject, and that is that the U.S. government, the Congress, has really never changed labor legislation coming out of airline deregulation. We still are, the airline industry still lives under the same labor legislation that was originally passed in the 20s. And it clearly has to be updated, which would allow airlines and managements and unions to get into, to have, I think, a healthier negotiating environment.
Let me switch gears, Mr. Lorenzo. Tell me about Savoy Capital. How much money are you managing, and what are you focusing on?
Maria, we are a private investment firm, and we invest our capital along with our investors. We have created a number of funds over the years. We're essentially conservative investors. Most of what we've done have been private equity. We've also had a lot of fun, which is one of our main goals.
Is there a focus as far as industries? I suspect you're not investing in airlines.
No, we try to stay away from airlines.
Mr. Lorenzo, good to have you with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria.
Frank Lorenzo coming to us today live from Princeton, New Jersey. A programming note: you can see more of the exclusive interview with former AMR CEO Donald Carty in the next hour of The Closing Bell. Coming up next is the 50th anniversary of the first ascent of Mount Everest, and that conquest helped create the multi-billion-dollar outerwear industry. Garrett Glazer takes a look at that growing business. Then thinking about investing in technology now, you'll want to find out what Ryan Jacob of the Jacob Internet Fund is buying. His fund is up more than 40% so far this year. We'll talk to him live, find out what